When Edith overheard a private conversation between her husband Peter and his mother Annie, she uncovered shocking truths about her marriage. That moment changed everything and ultimately saved her life. Hey there, lovely people. I'm Edith, proud wife and cat mom, 28 years old and newly married, 5 months to be exact. Everything seemed like a dream come true. Peter, my husband, and I had stable jobs, a happy life, and this beautiful balance where we supported each other's work and dreams. We even started planning for an amazing future together. But then, like a rogue wave, my mother-in-law, Annie, crashed into our picture. Now, don't get me wrong, she's his mom. And of course she loves him to bits. But Annie has this whole Peter's perfect complex. She constantly compares his achievements to mine, and brags about him to anyone who'll listen. I used to just brush it off like, of course she's proud, right? Little did I know, her attitude would turn my whole world upside down. So, the first time Annie came to visit, I went all out. I cooked this amazing dinner. Channeling my inner granny, bless her soul, she taught me everything I know. Let me tell you, I can cook. But Annie, wouldn't you know it, barely said a peep about my food. Instead, she launched into this whole monologue about Peter's favorite dishes, her signature recipes, of course. I just sat there, nodding like a bobblehead, trying not to be rude. It wasn't the end of the world, right? After dinner and coffee, Peter started cleaning up like we always do. We take turns. I cook, he cleans, he cooks, I clean. It's a system that works for us. But as soon as Peter touched the sponge, Annie's face practically crumpled. She excused herself abruptly and stormed out to the garden. Fresh air, I figured. Maybe some space to cool down after all that delicious food. Wrong. Turns out Annie wasn't cooling down, she was crying. And Peter was trying to calm her down. Now, I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but their voices carried through the open window of our bedroom. Annie was sobbing about how much she sacrificed for Peter, how she never thought she'd see him washing dishes. Apparently, according to her, I had broken her heart by making him do house chores. She even went on this rant about me, saying I was bossing him around like a queen, which, let me tell you, is absolutely not true. At first, I found it all kind of funny. I mean, come on, washing dishes? Surely Peter wouldn't take this seriously, right? He'd just laugh it off. But his reply sent a shiver down my spine. Don't worry, Mom, he said, she won't be a problem. My jaw practically hit the floor. Here I was, the woman he supposedly loved, and he was calling me a problem to his mother. But it didn't stop there. We've only been married a few months, he continued. Don't worry, in a year or two, she'll become a good obedient wife. Obedient wife? I couldn't believe my ears. Instead of defending me, he was feeding into her ridiculous ideas. Fury bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. I couldn't hold back any longer. What do you mean by an obedient wife? I practically roared at Peter, storming into the room. His eyes widened in shock, while Annie sputtered, How dare you barge in like this? Don't you have any decency, girl? It's my house, Annie, I shot back. Her face turned the color of a ripe tomato. Why aren't you talking, Peter? I demanded, turning to him. Say it right here in front of your mother. What are you planning to do? He stammered, clearly flustered. We were just talking about when we have kids, you'll quit your job and take care of them and the house, he finally mumbled. Naturally, you'll have more chores like washing dishes. I'm not trying to change you, just reassuring Mom that we're on the same page. My blood ran cold. Quit my job? Become a glorified maid? That was never part of the plan. We'd discussed having children, sure, but I'd always been clear that I wouldn't give up my career entirely. Maybe take some maternity leave, but definitely go back to work. Just yesterday, we'd talked about it again. I'd told him how much I loved my job, and he'd said he was so proud to be married to such an ambitious woman. So what was this about? Hold on a second, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I never agreed to quit my job forever. We talked about taking time off when the baby comes, not becoming a full-time housewife. Peter's face flushed crimson. Well, of course you'll take care of the baby and the house, he mumbled, looking everywhere, but at me. That's what wives do, right? That's what some wives do, Peter, I snapped. And guess what? I'm not one of them. The audacity of him to make such assumptions, to think I'd just roll over and accept this outdated view of marriage, infuriated me. I have dreams, Peter. Ambitions. I'm not going to throw them all away for a sink full of dirty dishes. But who will take care of the baby, he sputtered, like I'd suggested leaving the poor child on the doorstep. We'll figure it out, I said, my voice tight. There's daycare nannies, even grandparents. Plenty of options. But I will not be giving up my career for some 1950s fantasy of domestic bliss. The argument escalated from there. Voices grew louder, accusations flew. Annie chimed in, of course, adding fuel to the fire with her passive-aggressive comments about good wives and knowing their place. By the time my parents arrived, alerted by a frantic phone call from my mom who, bless her heart, can sniff out trouble a mile away, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My mom tried to calm things down. My dad, a quiet man but with a fierce protective streak a mile wide, gave Peter a look that could curdle milk. But it was of no use. Peter, emboldened by his mother's presence, dug in his heels. He insisted that a wife's place was in the home, not the workplace. That raising children was a woman's job, not something to be figured out. The more he spoke, the more I realized how wrong I'd been. We hadn't just had different expectations about household chores, we had fundamentally different views on marriage itself. I envisioned a partnership, a team working together to build a life we both loved. He seemed to see a hierarchy, with him at the top and me, the dutiful wife, happily catering to his every need. The revelation hit me like a cold slap. Here I was, 5 months into a marriage, and I barely recognized the man I'd thought I knew. The Peter who'd championed my career goals, who'd talked about sharing the load, had vanished. In his place stood a stranger, his voice echoing the outdated expectations of his mother. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. There would be time for tears later. Right now, I needed clarity. So, that's it then, I asked, my voice trembling slightly. This is what you see for our future? Peter hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. But before he could answer, Annie stepped forward. Don't worry, dear, she said, placing a hand on his arm. She'll come around. Just give her some time. That was it. The final straw. This wasn't about chores or changing diapers. This was about control. About a woman's place being firmly in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant. And I wouldn't be a part of it. No, Annie, I retorted. I won T come around. This isn't the life I want, and frankly, it's not the life I think you want for your son either. Peter looked at me, confusion and anger clouding his face. But before he could say anything, I continued. I'm filing for divorce. The room went silent. My parents looked at me, surprise and concern etched on their faces. Annie's mouth gaped like a landed fish, her hand still hovering protectively on Peter's arm. Peter himself looked like someone had just punched him in the gut. Divorce, he finally choked out. But we just got married. Apparently, Peter, I snapped, we weren't on the same page about what married means. My mom reached out and squeezed my hand, a silent gesture of support that meant the world. My dad cleared his throat, his gaze locking onto Peter's. Edith's right, son, he said, his voice low but firm. Marriage is a partnership, not a dictatorship. Annie scoffed. A partnership where the wife respects her husband's wishes, she countered, her voice dripping with disapproval. Respect goes both ways, Annie, I shot back, my temper flaring again. Because clearly Peter respects my career goals about as much as I respect his dinosaur-era views on marriage. The argument raged on for what felt like hours, but it was mostly background noise at this point. I had made my decision. This marriage, built on a foundation of sand, was crumbling around me, and I wouldn't be dragged down with it. Now, some of you might be thinking, why not just be a good wife? Take care of the house, have kids, you know, the whole package. Hey, that's a perfectly valid path for some women. But here's the thing, is that the only path? Are we born with pre-programmed settings for cooking and cleaning, while men come pre-wired for important stuff like, washing dishes? Don't you think there's more to life for both of us?